Welcome to the MongoDB podcast. I'm your host, Nick Raboy, and with me I have my co-host, Michael Lin.
Hey everybody, great to be here.
In this episode, we're going to be interviewing Nick Patrick of Radar.io, a geoservices company that's currently using MongoDB and is in our MongoDB for Startups program. Before we get into the core material, I just wanted to send out a quick reminder that our MongoDB World Conference is coming up. And if you'd like to attend in New York City, we're offering a 25% discount code on passes. So if you use the code podcast when you sign up, you'll receive a 25% discount towards your pass. So let's go ahead and jump right into the material of this particular episode. But before we get into the actual core material, Mike, is there anything that you want to say before we get started? Maybe introduce some things?
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, my name is Mike Lin, and I work obviously at MongoDB, where I focus on MongoDB for startups. I help run that program, and that's an awesome program. A lot of great energy. We help startups get off the ground and get up and running, and we do that by providing access to resources like access to MongoDB Atlas, access to MongoDB University on demand, and we provide marketing and community support. So just wanted to mention that right out of the gate, because we're gonna have a great chat today with Mr. Nick Patrick from Radar. But I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on the show. My name is Nick Patrick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Radar. We are building location data infrastructure for developers and product teams to build amazing location-aware app experiences.
Awesome. Can you want to shed a little bit more light into what that is or what that means?
Yeah, for sure. We offer privacy-first and developer-friendly location SDKs and APIs for things like geofencing or place detection, search, and geocoding. And again, the goal is to help people build amazing location-aware app experiences. So work with a number of great customers across shopping and retail, food and dining, travel, entertainment, and other verticals as well.
So if we look at a few of those verticals, just to give ideas on how it's used, can you explain like maybe how people are using it for shopping or how people are using it for airports or things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So there's sort of a couple different use case buckets that we see customers build with. The first is building in-app experiences that change based on where you are. There are a lot of apps that we use every day that, regardless of whether you're sitting at home on your couch or at the airport or about to check into a hotel or at a store or whatever, are basically static app experiences that don't change. So the first thing that we can help developers do is change the app experience when you're in a geofence or at a place. We can also do really battery efficient background geofencing and location context. So maybe you want to send a push notification when somebody is nearby something interesting, or when somebody arrives in a new city or something like that. There are also interesting analytics and segmentation use cases around understanding, where are users using your app? How can you sort of understand the real world context for user behavior? And then also operational use cases like, delivery tracking or routing or things like that.
It's a fascinating space. I love it. And I know we've spoken in the past, and you've mentioned Radar takes privacy extremely seriously, privacy and security. And I've heard you use this term, privacy first. So you say that you have a privacy first SDK. Can you help me understand and tell the listeners what that might mean, how they can understand what that means?
Yeah, I mean, rightfully so, there are a lot of conversations happening right now around data privacy and location data privacy in particular. And, historically, the location space has been filled with they might call themselves, location intelligence companies or data monetization companies, but really ad tech companies. And so the location space is a little bit different than maybe some other spaces in that respect. Every single e-commerce company that I've transacted with recently has my credit card information, has my home address, and they might use processors like a MongoDB or a Stripe, for example, to process or store that information. I, as a consumer, wouldn't expect AWS or MongoDB or Stripe to turn around and sell my credit card transaction history to a hedge fund, for example. But that happens a lot in the location space, and we think that's kind of messed up, and we want to fix it. So being privacy first for us means we're a SaaS company. We don't sell any of the data that we collect. We don't share it across customers. And we provide tools for minimizing data collection, data retention, controlling which user identifiers are sent to the server, and things like that.
That's great. And can you tell me a little bit about the revenue model, or how do customers pay for Radar services?
Yeah, so the Radar SDK is installed in apps, and basically our pricing is based off of how many monthly active users your app has. So it's sort of tiered pricing based on that. For some new APIs that we're launching soon, things like search and geocoding, those are going to be a bit more pay as you go, essentially, sort of transactional in their pricing models, but still sort of figuring out the specifics of that.
So obviously, we're talking to you, Nick, about what's going on at Radar, and we are MongoDB. So can you tell us a little bit about the MongoDB and Radar relationship? It's a long and storied one.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been using MongoDB since the very beginning. I actually first became familiar with MongoDB way back when I used to work at Microsoft and kind of come home nights and weekends and hack on side projects. And at the time, MongoDB was sort of a new hot thing. Node.js was sort of a new hot thing, and so a lot of my initial projects leveraged both of those technologies. So I was very familiar with them. And the initial prototype of Radar was built using MongoDB. Our service is very geospatial in nature, and obviously one of the selling points was the fact that MongoDB has geospatial indexing, geospatial query support out of the box. It made it very easy for us to not only get V1 up and running, but also scale as the company has grown, and we brought on more customers over time.
Yeah, and I think the geospatial support in MongoDB, it's obviously really rich at this point, but I believe it came out of a relationship we had early on with Foursquare, and you've got some history with Foursquare.
That's right. Yeah. So met my co-founder Kobe at Foursquare, our CTO Tim at Foursquare as well. So we've been in and around the location space for a while. I know Foursquare was a big MongoDB user back in the early days. And Tim, our CTO, obviously super familiar with MongoDB from his time at Foursquare. So when Tim came in and really leveled up what we were doing on the engineering and infrastructure side, he could also sort of take our MongoDB cluster or clusters to the next level and think about how we should shard our collections. And we use MongoDB Atlas as well. So super easy for us to provision new clusters, add new shards, and really just sort of scale everything up as the company scales.
So in regards to the geospatial queries and indexing, because that seems to be a huge deal for you, can you maybe shed some light on maybe what it is to your business, so that because it's a concept that not too many developers know, in my opinion, but maybe they should know because it is a very powerful feature. So I mean, how do you use it to your advantage is what I'm trying to go for.
Right. We have a few different types of entities inside of Radar. There are geofences that you set up. So these are polygons or circles that are sort of regions or places that you want to monitor. Users or devices, which are, assuming the user has granted location permissions and we're tracking locations, we're able to store that location data in a database. And then also events, which are things like, user enters this geofence or user enters this place. And the workloads are a little bit different, but for geofences, we need to do point and polygon queries to figure out, is the user inside the geofence or not? And so there is a MongoDB geospatial query operator to do just that. For events, you may want to run a report and say, hey, give me all events that happened in this particular bounding box. And so you can retrieve events that are near a certain point or in a certain bounding box. And so, the workloads are a little bit different depending on the entity, whether it's a user or a geofence or an event. But there are geospatial queries to support retrieving all of them in the ways that we need to.
In regards to the geofence data, I assume, I mean, without sharing your secret sauce behind Radar, I assume this is data that the user provides in their own applications and it gets submitted to your service?
That's right. So we let users or developers on the platform create geofences in a number of ways. They can draw them in the dashboard. They can call our API. They can bulk import them. And geofences in Radar parlance are really custom regions or places. So, we work with Burger King, for example. Burger King knows where all of the Burger Kings are. They know what the store IDs are, and they know other pieces of metadata, like does it have a drive-through, true or false, that they can attach to that geofence. And so those are custom places or regions that our customers and our developers create. We do have a places database. So if somebody comes to us and says, hey, we want to understand whenever somebody is at an airport or somebody is at an NFL stadium, for example, we do have place data out of the box that, again, in large part is served up kind of using the same geospatial queries and the same infrastructure as Geofences as well.
Awesome. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, sure thing. So you mentioned scale, you mentioned Atlas. I'm just curious, are you leveraging anything, any features around that in Atlas? Are you, for example, are you using the automated scalability capabilities that we recently released in MongoDB Atlas?
A lot of the scaling still happens manually, but I think it's very easy to go into Atlas and, for example, add a new shard or
Mhm.
increase the instance size. I think anytime, and we obviously try to avoid this as much as possible, but anytime there's a production incident or a performance issue, we're able to go in and use the reporting features, use some of the insights to kind of identify what's going wrong and where we need to make improvements. Is this shard or this collection getting particularly hot? Are we running out of read or write tickets, for example? And these are
Mhm.
things that not only can we go in and kind of look at the graphs and figure out what's going on, but also set alerts for. Those flow into PagerDuty pretty seamlessly. And long story short, it's very easy to proactively scale up to the extent that something's on fire and we need to figure out what it is and quickly make adjustments. Um, Atlas supports us there as well.
That's great. Yeah, I hear that quite a bit. Just the ease of use is really, really helpful.
Mhm.
So, what you're mentioning a number of other elements in your stack. Are there any that that have really changed the game for you? Just maybe it's in terms of monitoring or logging or anything else in the stack that you think is notable to mention to folks.
Yeah, we use Sentry as well for error logging. We use PagerDuty for alerting and incident management. We're an AWS shop, and so we use Elastic Beanstalk for a large number of our API servers to scale that up and scale that down. Obviously, our MongoDB clusters through Atlas are hosted in AWS as well, so it's easy to make that all work together very nicely.
So I have a follow-up question regarding the tooling that you're using, and I'm sorry if I missed this. I mean, what development technology are you using? Is it Node over there? I'm kind of getting that vibe, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, our API servers are primarily in Node. We are starting to spin up a few other services um, that use slightly different infrastructure, but I think that's another thing that really appealed to us about MongoDB in the early days is Node is obviously JavaScript. The way documents are structured, MongoDB works very seamlessly with JavaScript. Our front end, so our dashboard and our web application are built using React, so obviously JavaScript there as well. And so, I think the engineering team at Radar is generally very full stack, generally very product oriented, and the fact that we're using MongoDB and React and Node together actually makes it really easy for our developers to cross train and also sort of operate at different levels of the stack. So there's a fluency, a familiarity there that makes our engineering team really really productive.
And do you feel like being that MongoDB is BSON, it's particularly easy to work with, being that Node supports JSON pretty much out of the box?
Absolutely, yeah. I think if you know how to read JSON, you know how to read BSON, and everything works very naturally together.
Awesome.
Mm. Hey, so tell us what exciting features are coming down the pike at Radar. What are you planning to release?
Yeah, Radar started off as a geofencing platform first and foremost, and I think over time we realized that customers were asking for a few things that were obvious extensions of the current product that we build to support as well. So, for example, we started with just custom geofences. We then had customers ask us, "Hey, can you just tell us when somebody's at an airport or on a college campus or at an NFL stadium?" So we added a places context type with place detection out of the box. We had customers ask us, hey, can you tell us when somebody's in a particular country? Maybe there's a travel use case, or tell us when somebody is in a particular state. We work with DraftKings, which is a fantasy sports app. There are different fantasy sports and gambling regulations in different states. Can you tell us when somebody's in New York versus in New Jersey, for example? So we added a regions context type with basically geofences out of the box. So the last year and a half for us has been systematically expanding the context types that we offer out of the box. We've also thought about how we can expand to different platforms as well. So I think people think about geofencing and they tend to think about native mobile, iOS and Android, background tracking use cases. But the reality is there are foreground use cases as well, in-app use cases. If I open the app at an airport versus at home versus in a new city, change the in-app experience. It's not just about native mobile. This stuff is relevant on the web as well. And you can do a lot of stuff with mobile web and even desktop web in terms of adding location awareness. And even sort of server side, you have some data that you want to enrich and understand, which geofence was this lat long in. So thinking about what platforms we can support, the range of platforms that we can support over time as well. And I think where we're going over the next year is obviously to continue improving the product as it stands right now. But customers have been asking us for additional building blocks so that they can build additional types of location or app experiences. So, for example, you've uploaded a bunch of geofences in Radar representing your stores. Maybe you want to build a store locator. And so we're adding a search API for you to search geofences. Maybe that's going to power a store locator type use case. Maybe you're building a social app and you want to power a Find My Friends type use case. Let's add a user search API as well. We think about geocoding, so going from a lat long to an address or an address to a lat long. It's something that we take for granted in the Uber app, for example. You type in an address, it'll auto-complete it for you and drop a pin on the map. Or if you move the pin, it will turn that into an address. And a lot of the geocoding APIs out there right now are expensive or restrictive or complicated, not developer friendly. So there's an opportunity for us to launch a geocoding API as well.
In regards to the geocoding, and feel free to tell me that this is private info based on your business. But are you collecting that data yourself, or are you using another service that maintains that kind of location information?
Yeah, so we're location data infrastructure, and we are collecting the lat longs from the device. But you can think of Radar as a machine that basically turns lat longs and other sensor data into events and context. So when it comes to place data or when it comes to address data, our strategy is really to work with some of the best-in-class providers out there. In some cases, that's vendors. In some cases, that's open data sets. And really just sort of take the best of what's available to build a comprehensive view of the world. And we're really the pipes to help you, turn that into an app experience or send that data downstream to, your marketing automation tool or your data warehouse or something. So we do work with, open data sets like OpenStreetMap. In some cases, we do work with vendors, and that's for the place data and the address data that powers some of these services.
Got it. And my other question was, so you mentioned mobile, you mentioned desktop. Have you tried to dabble at all in IoT? Maybe as simple as maybe a fitness tracker, or even into the more hardcore territory of IoT at all?
Yeah, I think we totally could support that. We talk about our mission here as being to make every app on every device location aware, and we really do mean every device, right? So whether it's IoT or self-driving cars or even augmented reality is sort of all about where you are, right? There needs to be a location layer, there needs to be a context layer, sort of keep tabs on all that stuff, and add location context, add real world context to that sort of stuff. So we haven't focused there a ton historically, but we do aspire to be that location layer for every use case, for every platform, for every device in the long term.
So you've obviously been at this for a couple of years. Well, first of all, how old is Radar?
We started the company about 4 years ago, and my co-founder Kobe Berman was on the sales team at Foursquare. I was on the product side. I had wanted to start a company with sort of a short list of folks that I'd work with there, and Kobe was on that list. I actually after Foursquare went to Handy, which is a on-demand services company headquartered here in New York. That was actually where I had the initial experience of needing to actually build location tracking and geofencing for a project that I was working on directly. We wanted to build this Uber style, track your service provider on a map. The booking is about to start. How far away are they? Have they arrived yet? And it was a really challenging problem. We put an iOS engineer on it. We put an Android engineer on it. We put a web engineer and a server engineer, and it was really hard to build. And I think I reflected on it after the fact. And when we wanted to do payments, we just popped in Stripe. When we wanted to do analytics, we just popped in Mixpanel. When we wanted to send a text message, we just popped in Twilio. And no great full stack developer friendly solution really existed for location yet. So that was kind of the initial inspiration, and then teamed up with Kobe, who was the first seller at a company here in New York called mParticle, which is a customer data platform you all may be familiar with. And he was sort of hearing in market that, mParticle customers wanted to collect more location data, action on it, and do it in sort of a thoughtful, privacy first way. So started the company about 4 years ago, kind of putting those two ideas together, and that was the genesis.
Great. And you've obviously made leaps and bounds since then, and we're very proud at MongoDB to have had you in the startup program from the very beginning. I think you were one of the first startups in that program when Francesca began the process of helping startups out. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about maybe the benefits you experienced as being a participant in that program, and any recommendations you might have for folks that might be considering taking part in the MongoDB for Startups program.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about the technology and why MongoDB is great for us from a technology perspective. I think when you think about the startup program, obviously as a young company, you're capital constrained, and there were credits that we could take advantage of to, particularly as we started to scale and onboard bigger and bigger customers, do it in such a way that we could extend our runway a little bit, before we raised our next round of VC funding. So there was a sort of support and credits component to it. There was also an expertise component to it as well. So I got a chance to work with some of the solutions engineers over at MongoDB and have one-on-one sessions as we were getting ready to shard our collections for the first time. And so that expertise was valuable as well. So I think the technology is one thing, but I think both the financial and the personal support that came from the startup program were very valuable to us as well. And we were able to take advantage of it right at the time where we really first started scaling, and right before we raised our seed round, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. I love to hear those stories. And not to be a negative Nancy, but are there any hiccups in the journey or things that happened that, maybe you wish they didn't go that way, or tell me a little bit about some of the struggles that you've had in your path.
Sure. I think maybe I can talk tactical and then talk strategic. I think, certainly when it comes to MongoDB, I wish we'd sharded our collections earlier. We had a customer go live, and we basically, kind of a crazy number, but scaled 100x in terms of API traffic in about 4 weeks.
Whoa, that's huge.
And some of those were kind of big step function jumps. So this was also about 2 or 3 weeks after after Tim, our CTO, started. So it was like, hey, Tim, welcome to Radar. None of our MongoDB collections are sharded. Let's sort of frantically do it. Let's, as they say, switch the engine of the airplane while it's in flight. And we were able to do it and weather the storm. I think, wish that we'd maybe preemptively done some of that stuff, but Atlas made it easy. The support that we've got from the MongoDB team made it easy at the end of the day, and survived. So I think that's one maybe tactical piece. I think like more strategically, we really started out building Radar as a developer tool, and we got a lot of traction and a lot of throughput from non-technical stakeholders, and that's great. But I think we're sort of going back to our roots in a way as the product evolves and launch more of these APIs, and really focusing on developer experience and content and community. It's something that I think MongoDB does particularly well, and so we look at you all as an inspiration there, and we're investing in it now, and wish that we had invested there a little bit more sooner as well.
Yeah, great. Let's see. So, Nick, any other questions before we begin to wrap up?
If you're
No,
referring to me, then I think I'm good on questions. Nick Patrick actually did a great job.
Indeed. Indeed. This has been a great conversation. Nick Patrick, I want to take a minute and just say thank you. I think it's awesome that we work so closely together, and it's been great to watch Radar grow. So, Nick Raboy, anything else from you?
No, I just want to give Nick Patrick a chance to do any kind of plugs. So the website address, any kind of promos going on, maybe if you want to share your social media information, anything. It's up to you.
absolutely. So if you're a developer looking to add location awareness to your app, whether it's geofencing or search or geocoding, we'd love to hear from you about it and help you out. So you can visit us online at radar.io, and you can follow us on Twitter at Radar Labs. And we have a bunch of big product announcements coming out soon. So there's a newsletter you can subscribe to as well. And we're just really excited to see all the cool stuff that the developers and our customers build using Radar and indirectly using MongoDB under the hood as well.
Terrific. Nick Raboy, any plugs from you? Anything you want to recommend or say before we wrap
No,
up?
I mean, we have some events coming up. So, for example, if you're in the Seattle area, we have Seattle.local coming up, as well as MongoDB World. Just keep an eye out for those as they come through.
Absolutely. And I will take a minute, maybe less than a minute, just to mention that participants in the MongoDB for Startup program get access to those events and more for free, obviously tickets for free, to the MongoDB.local events that happen around the globe, and specifically MongoDB World, which is our biggest user group event. That takes place May 4th through the 6th, coming up at the New York Hilton in Midtown once again. So if you're interested in learning more about the MongoDB for Startups program, you can visit mongodb.com/startups to get some more information there. And I think that about wraps it.
Yep.
Nick Patrick, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
You bet. Thanks, guys. This is fun.
Wow, that was a great conversation with Nick. Very few CEOs are as technical as Nick, and what a great guy. So as Nick mentioned, head on over to radar.io if you want to learn more about his company, and you can even register for a free trial. Just a quick reminder about our biggest user conference of the year. It's MongoDB World. It happens May 4th through the 6th, 2020, and it's going to be at the New York Hilton once again. Use code PODCAST for a 25% discount on passes. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe or follow us. The MongoDB podcast, it's available on Apple Podcasts if you're listening on the Apple network. Please give us a positive review. If you'd take the time to do that, we'd love it. If you have suggestions for a topic you'd like us to cover on the MongoDB podcast, head on over to the MongoDB community forums at community.mongodb.com. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.